Welcome to the CATJ-T 1580-2880 series installation video. This video will instruct you on installing the TE cold applied transition joint on 3 conductor to 3 single conductor cables. Important: carefully unwrap materials by hand as they are required. Do not use a knife or other sharp object to remove packaging. Cold shrink materials can be damaged in their expanded state. Care should be used when handling these components from impact, dropping, or contacting sharp objects. This video is for demonstration purposes only. Please refer to the product installation instructions included in your kit for exact dimensions and measurements to use. These dimensions and measurements will change depending on the kit size. Prepare lead sheath and cable jacket. Remove PILC jacket as shown on side 1. Remove lead oxide from the lead sheath and clean with oil-free solvent. Abrade cable jacket and clean using an approved solvent. Notice: do not prepare EPR poly cables at this time. Cable will be prepared after the PILC cable prep is complete. Notice: be sure to clean and abrade the lead after the ring cut is made, but before the lead is removed. Remove lead sheath as shown. Notice: use care not to overbend the paper insulation when removing the lead sheath and while performing the following steps. Shielded cables. Cut back any batting and/or shielding tapes over all 3 phases to lead sheath cutback. Cut back shield or belt papers. Shielded cables. Cut back phase shields and remove any conductive material from paper insulation as shown, 6 inches from lead cutback. Remove any carbon remains. Belted cables. Remove the belted papers all the way back to the lead cutback. Use vinyl tape to tape over the end of the copper tape shield to prevent the tape shield from unwrapping and to cover any sharp edges. Tape the ends of paper insulation to prevent unraveling. Loosening of oil barrier tube, OBTC. The following steps are preparatory to the installation of the cold applied oil barrier tubes on the cable. The operation is vital to the simple installation of the product. The tube should be kept in its bag in a warm, dry place until use. Hold the oil barrier tube in one hand as shown and the holdout in the other hand. Twist clockwise and counterclockwise until it slides easily over the holdout. Repeat the operation holding the oil barrier tube first in the middle and then at the other end. Notice: be careful not to remove OBT from holdout at this time. Installing the oil barrier tubes, 1 phase at a time. Slide the holdout over the cable, black end first, and move it as far onto the crotch as possible without damaging the papers. Twist the oil barrier tube and slowly push it to the end of the holdout. Gently slide about 2 inches of the oil barrier tube off the holdout at about a 3-inch gap to avoid jamming holdout tube onto the other phases. This is achieved by twisting and pulling the holdout with one hand while gripping the oil barrier tubing with the other hand. When there is 2 inches of OBTC on the phase, slide it back into the crotch by twisting the OBTC in the direction of the cable papers. Leave a 1-inch gap from end of OBTC to lead cutback. Take the oil barrier tube completely off the holdout using a twisting and pulling motion as shown. Nudge tube up to the 1-inch mark for final position. Notice: twist the holdout clockwise and counterclockwise while pulling out. Notice: if the tube is not correctly positioned, it is possible to gently slide it into place. Be careful not to damage papers underneath. Always twist in the same direction the papers lay. Repeat with the other 2 oil barrier tubes. Clean OBTCs using supplied TE solvent. Clean the OBTC insulation as shown. Notice: do not use a dry cloth on the silicone tube. It will leave lint. Apply copper mesh and EXRM 3020-1200 tape. Wrap the copper mesh around all 3 phases, starting 1/2 inch onto the black layer of the OBTC. Using slight tension, wrap 2 layers of mesh on the OBTC. Continue wrapping half-lapped layers up to the lead sheath. Use care not to overlap the lead sheath. Make 4 complete wraps and tie off. Total width should be 1 1/2 inches. Apply 2 wraps of EXRM 30/20/1200 tape centered over the lead cutback, then continue half-lapped layers 1 inch onto the copper mesh, finishing with 2 complete wraps. Only part of 1 roll will be required. Apply 2 strips of dual layer mastic EPPA 225 A1 silver package. Remove liner exposing thinner yellow mastic from EPPA 225 and roll into convenient size. Wrap the dual layer mastic thin yellow side down, stretching it to half its width over the copper mesh. Start on top of the copper mesh, half lapping onto the lead sheath ½ inch past the previously installed EXRM 30/20/1200 tape. The total width of the wrap should be approximately 2 1/2 inches. Apply a second strip of dual layer mastic on top of the previously installed mastic beginning at the lead. Then, wrapping the mastic, filling in next to the lead cutback on top of the previously installed copper mesh to make a smooth profile. Install OBM insert. Assemble OBM insert per box instructions, aligning the 2 pieces with the lighter yellow mastic, SRM. Spread the phases and position the insert as shown. The OBM insert should be making contact with the dual layer mastic applied in step 8. Notice, use caution in not overbending the phases. Wrap cable ends with tape. Wrap ends of the cables with vinyl tape to keep OBM insert in place. Notice, check again that each of the OBM insert legs are all the way back to the dual layer mastic applied in step 8. Wrap OBM around OBT phases. Notice, use clean, dry, bare hands. Wrap the extending OBM insert legs in the same direction around the 3 phases and ensure that the ends make good contact back onto the OBM. Use slight tension if necessary. The material is soft and putty-like. Stretch and press together with fingers to make all ends meet. Wrap OBM patches S1340. Beginning on the lead 1 inch past the previously installed dual layer mastic in step 8, wrap the first patch, number 1, under slight tension onto the lead and back onto the previously installed dual layer mastic. Wrap the remaining OBM patches 2, 3, and 4 so that they each cover ½ inch of the previous OBM patch, with the 3 and 4 patch covering the OBM insert. Wrap EXRM 30/20/1200 tape. Wrap EXRM 30/20/1200 tape under light tension beginning over the last OBM patch, number 4, for 2 complete wraps, and then continue half-lapping towards the lead until the entire roll is used. The total length of the applied tape over the OBM patches should be approximately 3 to 4 inches. Notice, use care that the tape does not slide off of the OBM and onto the OBTC tubes. Installing the PILC breakout boot. Remove vinyl tape holding phases together. Slide the breakout over the phases. Position the breakout as far into the crotch as possible. Slide back into crotch using your fingers on the holdouts. Notice, make sure that the spiral holdout is not caught between the phases and is free before continuing to remove the finger holdouts. Gently twist holdouts, fingers, to activate silicone grease. Use caution not to remove holdout, just loosen only at this time. As the boot is pushed back into the crotch, the holdouts should begin to slide out of the boot. You should be able to feel the mastic that was applied in step 12. Gently twist the fingers in order to release the holdouts. Press the boot into the crotch area slowly and carefully while removing the holdouts. When you feel the mastic in the crotch area with your fingers, you have the boot far enough back. Remove the finger holdouts at this time. There should be at least 1.5 inches of black OBTC extending past the fingers of the CABO boot. Release the spiral by pulling continuously counterclockwise, passing underneath the cable and pulling on top. Re-establish reference line. Re-establish the reference line on each phase by measuring from the black portion of the OBTC. Refer to the chart in the installation instructions for the proper measurement. Using proper cutting tool, cut off excess cable at this point. Be sure to make the cut as square as possible. Remove insulation. Confirm that the conductor OD range is acceptable according to Table 1, page 2. Determine if the insert half shells must be removed depending on the conductor size. Round out sectored conductors if necessary. Remove the insulation as shown. Do not install the connector at this time. Refer to the installation instructions for the proper insulation cutback. Prepare poly cables. Prepare the cables as shown. Please refer to the product installation instructions included in your kit for exact dimensions and measurements to use. Park breakout boot on poly side EXRM 1954. Carefully slide breakout boot onto each poly cable. This will be used as part of the rejacketing system later. Ensure that the 3-1C side goes first and the spiral holdout ends are free. Park CSJ body on poly side. Slide the cold shrinkable joint body over one polymeric cable. Notice, take care that the release strip of the spiral holdout points towards the jacket of the polymeric cable as shown. Install ShearBolt connectors. Complete one phase at a time. Insert conductors so that the insulation butts up with the end of the connector. Hand tighten the bolts to firmly grip conductors in place. Confirm that the dimension between semicon cutbacks is correct according to the chart in the installation instructions. This is a fail-safe measurement. If the dimensions are correct, you have prepped all of your cables correctly and it's okay to proceed. Follow the tightening sequence as shown. You can use either a hand socket wrench or a cordless impact wrench to install the TE ShearBolt connectors. For hand socket wrench installation, alternately tighten the bolt set by half turns with a socket wrench until the bolts shear off. For cordless impact wrench installation, follow the same procedure by applying the impact tool to each bolt via 1-second intervals, equivalent to approximately 1.5 bolt turns. Repeat the tightening sequence as shown in illustration to the right, tightening each bolt until the head of the bolt shears off. Notice, TE cordless impact wrench, part number CA7469-000, which offers minimum torque of 1,460 inch-pounds or 122 foot-pounds or equivalent, are suitable tools to install these connectors. Smooth sharp edges using the provided aluminum oxide paper or a file. Clean connector to remove particles. Insert red cable spacer EPPA 128 and mark each OBTC with 1¼ inch reference. Insert red cable spacer in between splices and against breakout body as shown. Install as far into the crotch as possible. Do not overbend phases. Clean interface area at this time with TE supplied solvent wipe. Mark each phase 1 1/4 inches from OBTC black edge toward boot. Apply dual layer mastic EPPA 225A1 silver package. Remove liner exposing thinner yellow mastic from EPPA 225 and roll into convenient size. Wrap the dual layer mastic with the thinner yellow side facing down, stretching it to half its width. Start at the center line of the connector, half lapping to a 1/2 inch onto the OBTC, using all of the mastic strip. Be sure to fill the gaps and low spots around the connector to create a smooth profile transition from the connector to the PILC insulation. Apply orange pressure tape EXRM-3020-1200. Starting on connector adjacent to mastic, install 2 complete wraps of orange pressure tape. Continue to half lap over the mastic towards OBTC using constant tension. Once clear of the mastic, install 2 complete wraps, again adjacent to mastic on OBTC side. Use the entire tape roll. Apply vinyl tape and clean interface. Wrap vinyl tape covering the last wrap of the pressure tape. Clean interface area using supplied TE solvent as shown. Notice, it is important that the end of the connector is still exposed as shown. Apply lubrication. With a gloved hand, lubricate the cable insulation and semicon area with the supplied DCC grease. Be sure to use extra DCC grease at semicon cutback. Use all of the DCC supplied in the kit. Notice, use only the DCC grease provided in the kit. Notice, after cleaning, ensure that 1 1/4 inch mark is still visible. Installation of the splice body. Position the splice body so that the silicone body's edge is aligned with the 1 1/4 inch mark. Release the spiral holdout by pulling counterclockwise while holding the splice body in place. The spiral holdout cannot be pulled out all at once. Slowly pull the spiral holdout on top of the cable and then pass it around and underneath the cable until the spiral has been completely removed. Important: the splice body must remain aligned with the 1 1/4 inch mark while the spiral holdout is released. Once the splice is partially shrunk adjacent to the marking tape, there is no need to hold the splice. Use 2 hands at this point to remove the remaining spiral holdout. Apply shielding mesh over installed splice body. Beginning at the PILC crotch, wrap shielding mesh over the OBTC and across the splice body. Half lap the copper mesh across the splice, continuing to the metallic shield of the poly cable, making 4 complete wraps of shielding mesh over the poly cable shield and tying off. Notice, Reposition red cable spacer, EPPA 128. Reposition red cable spacer in between splices and against breakout body as shown. Install as far into the crotch as possible. Do not overbend phases. Secure poly cables with vinyl tape so red cable spacer will stay positioned. Apply rubber pressure tape, MVFT 50-6400. Starting 1 inch onto the joint bodies, stretch the tape to half of its original width and wrap the 2 inch wide orange elastic tape under high tension towards the red cable spacer and PILC breakout boot. Continue towards the lead, going 1 inch onto the lead. Keep half lapping back and forth over the entire length until all of the pressure tape is used. Remove vinyl tape holding poly cables together. Install copper mesh. Install 2 wraps of copper mesh at end of red elastic tape on the lead and tie off. Install ground braids. Flare one end of the ground braid and place it onto the shield. Attach the braid to the shield by placing 2 wraps of the spring clamp over the braid. Fold the braid back over the spring clamp wraps. Continue to wrap the remaining clamp over the braid. Tighten clamp by twisting it in the direction it is wrapped and secure with vinyl tape provided. If an external ground is required, lay the short end of the ground braid near the solder block end on the top of the copper mesh and next to the splice grounds on the lead. Install large clamp over 3 braids and external ground if applicable on the lead sheath. Tighten and trim excess braids. Tape over all spring clamps. Lift external ground if used and apply 1 strip of gray sealing mastic to the previously cleaned lead sheath under solder block. Press solder block and ground into sealing mastic applied. Install the shielding mesh. Wrap a half-lapped layer of the copper mesh over the PILC spring clamp across the splice and over the spring clamps on the poly side. Tie off. Position breakout boot, EXRM, on poly side and install. Carefully slide sealing breakout boot as far as it will go over the splice bodies. Release the spiral holdouts by pulling counterclockwise while holding the breakout boot in place. The spiral holdout cannot be pulled out all at once. Slowly pull the spiral holdout on top of the cable and then pass it around and underneath the cable until the spiral has been completely removed. After all spiral holdouts have been removed, clean and abrade cables to remove any grease before installing gray sealing mastic. Remove red tab and collapse solid white interior holdout by squeezing together. Notice, solid white interior piece remains after collapsing. Install complete short strip, 5 inches, of gray sealing mastic at the edge of the rolled finger. Unfold the rolled up finger over the gray mastic. Repeat for the other 2 phases. Install GMRS rejacketing sleeve. Remove cardboard holdout tube from poly side of sleeve, then release paper from gray mastic on each end of the sleeve. Use the supplied TE wet solvent wipe to wet the GMRS closure sleeves for easier installation. To apply, wipe the gray mastic strips to coat the surface as shown. Recessed areas of corrugations or other grooves do not require lubricant. Wet the front rounded part of the latch and the back side of both latches to aid installation. Also, lubricate the breakout boot surface. Center the GMRS sleeve under the splice. The expanded or larger end is positioned on the poly side. For external ground, make sure jacket sleeve gray mastic is positioned over previously installed solder block and gray mastic. Wrap the GMRS sleeve around the splice and secure using the 2 pre-latch clips provided to help hold the sleeve in place. Starting at the PILC end of the sleeve, slide the installation tool along the latches. Lubricate inside of tool before starting. Feed the latch rails into the installation snap tool and push forward. The tool will snap the latches together as it is moved across the splice. Remove the pre-latch clips as the installation snap tool moves along the latch. If the tool gets too difficult to slide, you can tap the small end of the tool gently with a hammer. Notice, flap must not pinch or kink between layers. Inspect latch to make sure all areas are engaged. If any locations along the latch are unengaged, then close by hand, or you can use channel lock pliers to engage. Install guides and tie wraps. Install tie wrap guides on top of channel as shown, centered over mastic underneath. Install 2 tie wraps at each end per spacing as shown. Use a pair of pliers to tighten the tie wrap snugly. Tighten the inside tie wraps first, then the outside tie wraps. Trim the tie wraps with snips. Installation is complete.